So you know the theory. We've heard what goes on and how we need to prepare the data to bring it into Power BI. But what does that bring it into Power BI actually mean? And what was that nonsense that I was banging on about last week, saying that, frankly, the gold layer isn't in our data platform where we've built? It's in this Power BI nonsense. How does that work? What's going on? Hi, my name's Ross, the creator and founder of Geordie Consulting and Geordie Intelligence, the YouTube channel that you're watching right now. What we're looking at today is understanding what the Power BI component of the semantic model actually is and why this is the critical part and the critical center of your analytics suite, and why it's so important that we have to understand that our whole data governance journey and the lineage that flows into the semantic model goes way back into our processes. So we covered that last week. So let's actually look at a bit more about, here's the semantic model. This is the shape of the data that we need to bring through into something that can then effectively be analyzed so that we can build stuff in our data platform that can then be used more effectively by the business, which then is going to next level their analytics. This is where we kind of left off last week, isn't it? So we've got kind of this build here where we can see places, but we can also got like nice column charts with inspections per year, and they're interactive. They interact together. So if we were to click, say, on here, so 2020, we'll see that the other visual will filter. So if we picked a smaller year, which makes sense, you can see 2026, it's filtered, obviously filtered, and we can see different things coming through at different points of time. So how does that all work is kind of the question. That's the bit that confuses a lot of people. And this whole interactivity within Power BI is a real core component that you have to understand. It's not just a static, here is the view, get used to it kind of thing. That's what you get. There's actually the ability to really explore the data, and the exploration is done through this cross-highlighting or cross-filtering. Two different capabilities, got benefits in either one, depending on which way you want to go with it. But that's really important for people to understand. So we need to understand how that comes together. What are we doing then in an IT perspective to build the data platform that's going to support the business and what they need? So at Geordie Consulting and Geordie Intelligence, we do two different things. Okay, Geordie Consulting is a partner to our clients. We work, we support them with the goal of enabling them to own their solutions. Geordie Intelligence is about using what we gain and replaying that back to you in a free way, using real world data sets so we can really get into it without breaking or violating any of our NDAs that we've got with our various clients. It's a really good opportunity for you to learn from what's going on in the real world of consultancy, where we are constantly out working with clients, delivering solutions, using the Power BI suite, using the wider data platform options to actually then leverage and bring insights to the boardrooms, but also to all levels of an organization. So here, we've got our data set, haven't we? The way we start is we look at the model. Okay, so the data model is always important, and this is key. For this, what you'll hear is Kimball schema or star schema. And we've kind of got a star schema in that we've got inspections, calendar, and buildings are kind of there. Okay, but we can see some oddities within them. Okay, and this is where reality hits. Okay, and as I say, I don't think, if I'm being completely honest, I've ever seen a perfect star schema in any company or in any data model that I've looked at. There are always things that we have different within it. So for here, the results is slightly odd because results is hanging off a fact table, but it's because the results are lots of little subcomponents of it. So we've folded it through, said this is the parameter, and you end up with a really efficient data table for Power BI, but rubbish in terms of if we were to use this with a database, it'd be terrible. Okay, so this is one of those compromising things that you go through. And we might look at this and say, well, we've only got 65,000 rows of data. We don't need it. We can have the extra columns. The impact isn't going to destroy anything. And that subtlety is important for you to recognize that goes on within many organizations and how businesses will leverage Power BI. And a solution that you think is right today, don't be afraid to revisit it and change it. And that's one of the things we can do from an IT perspective to help support the business in getting the most out of their IT solution, out of their Power BI solution, So let's have a look at this results table first, just to kind of clarify what we're doing. So we go to the table view, and we're just going to go to the results table. And what you can see, I'll zoom in a bit, okay, is we've just got three things. So we've got the inspection ID. So which inspection was it? The attribute that it relates to, and then what was the value for it? So if we pick inspection ID 1, yeah, so the first inspection that we've got in our list, you can see we've got, 16 rows, I think it is? 22. So we've got 22 rows of data in there. And we can see, here we go. We would, in essence, need an extra 22 columns to put all that into the inspection. This is everything that went on. This is a really efficient way. We just put those in there. Even more efficient would be to have an attributes table so that we just have an attribute ID in there. But realistically, by the time you actually factor that through and where Power BI is at now, you're probably not going to see a big difference. It would be nice to put them in because then we'd be able to put a hierarchy of actually what they meant. And I think we've done that in the past where, what does GI versus SI mean? What does analytes mean? Analytes, yeah. It's kind of what's happening. So we can go through, we could do that and we could put like a plain English version of the description and also put in hierarchy because presumably SI and GI, you want to be together. One's presumably sampling, it's been sampled, it's been tested, one's inside, one's external. These are all things that go through. So we can see that we've got lots of stuff in there that would need to be split out. And we could do that. We haven't done that yet, but we can talk about what that would look like. We've then got the idea of our inspections. So inspections take place every year. And as we can see, we've kind of pulled this to a point where it's a lot simpler. And we could still probably go further in that we've got inspected by and lab are both names. And we could go through and say, well, we're going to ID these, put an ID in. Because remember, we used that spreadsheet that keeps coming back. We could use that and then put an ID on the values that come back through. And then we could be putting the ID in when we match these up to say, well, this is the ID we want to use. There's lots of options available to us. We're just being as quick and easy as possible. When you've rationalized and normalized stuff, the impact of column storage for text versus number, yes, number is always going to be smaller, but at some point you're still going to have to store the text. And Power BI's compression algorithm is quite good that if it's duplicates and there's multiple of the same, it tends to be all right at compressing them. And we're going to find probably that these these might well be some that we would be okay with. But I'm saying a lot there. What would we do to figure that out? Can you think? Message down below? No? I'll wait. So we could use DAX Studio, of course, to extract the VertiPack file and then have a look at VertiPack Analyzer and assess and see, well, actually, what is the impact of that column on our total data model size? And if it was big or if it was a problem, we might say we're going to do something and make a change at the next update that we're going to do on the data model. And that's something that will always happen. If you're saying, built the data model once, we're never going to come back and touch it again, you're in the wrong line of work. So from a data pipeline perspective, you should be expecting a consistent set or a constant set of changes that are going to be needed. And you're going to need to deliver the old until the new is ready and make sure that we've got through that testing cycle. You need to make sure you've got mechanisms for the business to hand over and say, right, this is what we do. Can you replicate that with your proper solution and serve that up for us and do it over a much longer period than we can do? So I might have a weekly extract or something like that. This is what I build. One of the things that I find works really well for that is data flow Gen 1, which is why obviously I'm going to be really dead against getting rid of data flow until something is there to replace it, because it puts something in the hands of citizen developer that's no nonsense, no extra cost, no fuss, no muss. It just does what it needs to do. But it's also then exportable and importable and improvable, because you can say, I'm going to take this. We could say, well, we're going to do the Microsoft way. We're going to give it to Copilot. Say, give me the Python script to do this with our thing. Or you could know what you're doing and do it anyway and build a data pipeline to replicate that. So you're not having to run an export from your system to then produce the spreadsheet that then goes to somebody who then does some manipulation of it and produces report content. A little bit of rigor to say, bring that through data flow means we've got a point. This is the point, the pickup point that they're going to need to use for analysis, which gives us a target that we can then go back, work through and validate against. And if there's differences, we can understand them. Like it's a weekly spreadsheet. So actually we found that it's just looking at what was created in that week versus everything that's actually open. Those kind of things are really important to understand and to surface out, because if there's business logic missing, we can replicate that and put that into our full ETL process. But again, we need to have that buy-in, that support, that capability. And the only way we get that is by having target endpoints for it. So, sorry, Microsoft, you can't get rid of data flows quite yet. Okay, stop. So yeah, so we get this. So as I say, we're talking about the compression algorithms and the way it works, how that does. This is one of those definite use cases where use DAX Studio, look at the Vertipack analyzer, look at your column costs, what percentages of your total model is a column. And as you start to find really key ones that are really bad, we've got a problem. And we know here we've got this in twice, so we need to get rid of it from one. We don't need both. So we've got the normalized and the denormal and the unnormalized one. This is what's come straight through, and this is what's come through from our fixed one. So we should remove one as we're pulling this through. Again, it's been left in purely because you want to see it while we're going through and working on it. But real world, we would look to remove because we want our fact tables, which have got where all the dimensions come together, should just be dimension information as much as possible, and any key relevant stuff for that transaction. So what was the total? What was the item count might be it? Things like that. But if you then think, well, where are you going to put everything together? We're into the full invoice discussion, that's a discussion that goes on for months, depending on who you speak to and how many invoices you've got to manage. Then the invoice discussion is about, well, we've got the invoice header and we've got the invoice detail, which is generally how you would build it for a data solution. But for an analytics solution, you don't want two tables, you want to put them together. So you put them together or you do something different that's then going to allow you to use the summary information for the main fact, and then in the event you need to, you can go to something else with a lookup. There's an awful lot of ways and means to do these things. It's just, you've got to be careful. You'd use a treat as, so go treat as where order ID or invoice number is, blah, 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 and that produces the table, and then that table is what you could use for analysis or to present back what has happened. So if you wanted to build, show me what's happened, we can do it. But it's never quite as clear cut as everybody wants it to be with that. And as I say, invoices is a great example where it doesn't quite work. If you need to have that level of detail, you end up putting in header fields and having them duplicated across the fact. As IT professionals, understand that the shape of data is the core part that is going to give analytical success or failure. And if people can't get the data in the right shape or structure or time, they won't use it. And as soon as the business stops using our enterprise data platform, we've lost, because what will happen is it's death by 1,000 cuts. Every little report, every little spreadsheet, every little thing that is built is eroding that spend, eroding the value proposition of that enterprise platform that you will have spent significant money on, and that will have, of course, been backed by the business. But now it's being eroded by the business. And that erosion is real, and it happens the second somebody is unable to get the answer out of it and has to go to Excel or build something separate. And if we can't work out how we can intercept those if we can't work out how we can rapidly support those and bring them back into the fold, it's not prevent, it's about saying, oh, you need to do this, no problem. How can we help? Bring it back into the fold. Data flows is the way. They build the stuff in data flows. We drum that into them. Build it in data flows. Really easy, dead easy. And when things go wrong, you've got it locked because it's there, and you can still go in and edit stuff because we can clone the data flow. We can modify it outside it and see, all right, I can fix this now. When it's fixed, you can then copy and paste into the old data flow and save it, and it'll reload it. But only when it's fixed. So you've got data, because remember, Power BI does parallel refreshes. So it's refreshing alongside the model as opposed to deleting the data and then running the refresh. So if it fails, you still got data. Yes, it'll be a day old, but most people still think, I'd rather have day old data that's in there and the report still works than have the report not work at all. Okay. So yeah, we have to get to that. And then from those data flows, we can start saying, right, how can we help? Yep, we can bring it in. Oh, it's just a slight tweak here. Not a problem. We can do it. That's how you then add value from the data platform. And the more stuff then comes from the data platform, and by stuff, I mean semantic models and report content, because you might only have 2 or 3 semantic models if you're really slick. And then those 2 or 3 semantic models are serving hundreds of reports across the organization from multiple departments. But it will all come back to making sure that we've got a mechanism that allows the business to feed into, this is the report content that I need today. And it's not a case of saying, have a meeting and talk about it, let's have a 2-day workshop. They don't have time, okay? Because those people, the analysts, are crushed with work they're doing. And I know from an IT side, we're crushed with the work we're doing. But what we have to do is say, right, how can we be efficient in what we do? That's the thing. Not lazy, not anything like that. It's efficient. And efficiency is saying what works. What works is the data flow that you have built to deal with your issues and your challenges. Okay? You've built that. Brilliant. Awesome. Let us copy that. Take the JSON out. Have a look then, right, what transformations are happening? Right, what do we need to fit into our layer to make you get something you want? Because we can get the files that are produced, we can see the exports, we can see what transformations you're doing. And with that information, we can support the business in everything they want to do. And it suddenly stops being adversarial and becomes very supportive. Again, that's what Microsoft means when they talk about the data framework, yeah? So if we look at the Fabric Adoption framework, okay? So the Fabric Adoption roadmap, I hate coming back to this and back to this and back to this, but we have to. This has to be ingrained in what we are doing. We're here to support. And the key thing for me, this is the bit, this is what you have to understand, okay? The key thing is here. Center of Excellence, mentoring, user enablement, community of practice, user support. Success doesn't come from IT, but also there's lots of stuff around those, isn't there? Doesn't come from the business. The adoption framework makes it clear we have to be together and we have to work together to get the results. And when you look at the detail, the Center of Excellence exists well within, yeah, that's here, exists within both. So the Center of Excellence contains IT and business resources because that's how you get success. We want to do that. The community of practice is that wider area where people who, I can't do full development, or I can't, I'm too busy with my department, I'm not available to do other stuff. That's the community of practice, but they're kept close because we want to find mechanisms to uncover, oh, here's a data flow that they're building. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we'll help you. User support, mentoring, user enablement, make it really easy to have that front door and say, oh, this is a data flow you're working on. How can we support that? Bring that into the fold properly. You're always going to have that foundation or that frontier of data flows being built because requirements are changing and things like that. But you've now got a mechanism to cycle them back into your enterprise platform, as opposed to it being with a traditional solution. You've lost that data, and now every report that you've got that contains any element of that is gradually being eroded. And that Excel spreadsheet that's there gradually grows and grows and grows, and the value of your data platform goes down, right? And this is a consistent way. This is what happens. This is what we've witnessed in businesses many, many times. This is what we see in organizations that try and run Power BI from the business, but we also see in organizations that try and run Power BI from IT. It does not work. It only works when the two are coming together. If they're not together, they're not aligned, you end up spending a lot of money and not delivering consistent, high-value solutions. So here we go. Yeah, so we've got our data model put together. We've then got two tables off to the side. Okay, so these two tables here, these are something which I recommend people put in. So one of the things people say, put the table in, like the DAX table or the measures table or whatever you're going to call it. Call it DAX table. You can call it whatever you want. Okay, there's a hidden secret table called measure, so you can't do stuff. So that's why I avoid it. Measurements or something like that. Just call it DAX. And then secondary. Now, secondary is one that's really difficult to explain because it just makes no sense. Until you do it, until you actually see this in action, secondary makes no sense. And at this point, when you look at it, what's the secondary for? When you do Power BI, and remember I keep saying we're going to have lots of secondary reports. When you have secondary reports, you can create DAX measures within those secondary reports. Again, how are we building up our loop to feed back and say, all right, I've written a new DAX measure. It's really good. Can we promote it? Oh, it's great. No problem. How do we find it? If we put our measures that we create in secondary reports in a folder called secondary, and I go, oh, that measure was really good. That visual's great. Can we have a look at it? Oh, it's in secondary. So that measure's only going to exist in that report. We have to promote it up into their master file. So we do that. If we put everything, even the ones we created in DAX, how am I going to separate the ones that exist only in this report with the ones that are part of the core pack? That's the mindset. This is the mentality. It's always preparing to upscale the solution. Okay. So in terms of what we have for them, okay, they are pretty simple. So what we look at secondary first. Okay, so it's just created a single column, go to the enter data, blank. There you go. Create one measure in it. And I've just called the measure create report content here. Okay, create report level measures here. The reason I've done that is I used to put it as a measure that was just a text measure of create blank report measures. But you're not going to read that, are you? Because you can see it. You can't see the content of it. So I thought we could do that. You can also obviously put a description in and again, see what these things. Lots of personal ways of doing it. If you've got a better way, let me know down below. Seriously, I'd be interested. Then obviously we hide the single blank column, and it then becomes a measure table, so it appears towards the top. And then for our DAX, here we go. Okay, so again, it's similar. We've got to create a column and then put some measures in. Good practice is to put counts in. Lots of times you're just going to need counts. Count of buildings, count of inspections. You'd be surprised how often these measures come up. So counts of key fact tables, well worth doing. Okay. So we get something that works and is put together. And then from this point, if you remember, we added one measure just to keep it going. But effectively just from 2 measures, we can do an awful lot because we've got things, and the relationships are what will determine how things flow through. So in the database side, we'd do that select star from where. It's very similar. Okay, this is allowing us to do that join here, and we've got the join effectively fundamentally there. Okay, but these joins are very hard coded, so they are there. They're not. It's not a case that you can just go, oh, I'm going to manually do a join. There are ways of doing that without any relationships. It's not great because it causes all sorts of problems in that the model isn't geared up to necessarily filter the way you want it to filter. But this is key. So we can see the direction of the measure. Okay, so for the calendar, we can see one date goes to many rows. We've got one to many. Okay, for here, we've got an issue where we've got, it's not happy. Okay, invariably this is because there's blanks on both sides, even though we've tried to remove blanks. So there's something which is not happy with. We can have a look at it, but it's ended up being a many-to-many relationship, which is not ideal. It will work because we've pushed to say cross-filter direction both, so these will go both ways. So we can look at inspections by buildings, and we can look at use buildings to filter inspections. Yeah. So if we clicked on building inspections or something like that, it would show us the building. If we split to the building, it would show us all the inspections. Yeah. It might well be that there's issues with it, but again, do you remember what we did last week when we talked about data governance? So manually enter data. So potentially there's just rogue information in there that isn't being validated. And that's a huge problem that we potentially need to work through. And it'd be very difficult to work through in the context of this New York City data. But from a business data perspective, it should be something we would target and say, right, we are going to fix and make sure that this data is much better and much better prepared so we can use it and reuse it. Yeah? Okay. So you get that. The last thing that we need to be aware of then is this most difficult thing, right? And that is DAX. Okay, so the headache that people always have in Power BI is DAX. So we have a look at here. So the DAX we've got for buildings is simply count the rows. So count the rows of the buildings table. And DAX is pretty good in that you've got IntelliSense in it now. So if I went through and I said, look, let's go through to here, let's delete that. And we're going to say count rows. So we can see we've got IntelliSense. We can count the rows. And it tells you, even though it hides it behind the IntelliSense, what it's expecting. So it's expecting a table. So we start typing a table name in. We can see the icon. This is a table. So we're going to pick table, close brackets. So that's a measure written. And the simpler measures are only available if you've got a decent data model, really. A good data model makes your measures much simpler. If you're struggling and having to write really complicated DAX, chances are your data model is either wrong or you've not understood what you've done. Okay, and the way you do it is simple. So if a simple measure will work like that, you'll filter context. So that's what other things are being selected around, what other tables are being used to filter the fact table that we're doing, because that's what we're doing. What will happen? What's that context mean? Okay, so what do I mean by that? So if we come here, okay, and we click on there, so we say 2026, and we then come to here, and we click on this filter. So we can see for here, so all of a sudden, what we're saying is where it includes 2026. So we're filtering our inspections table to be 2026, the year 2026 by calendar. Right? That's coming from the cross-filtering that we've got. Right? You can also obviously do that elsewhere. So we could say, we could put something in here. We could say, well, we want to look at Staten Island, and we can suddenly see how it all filters what's going on in Staten Island. We can look at Queens, Brooklyn. We can start to understand everything that's going on across our organization. But that's because the DAX we've written has been simple. If we look at the one we wrote just to be in, this one, where we're dividing one by the other, we've got something here, haven't we? We can see we can reference existing measures. So we're dividing buildings measure by inspections. It's meaningless measure. That's just meaningless, pointless. It doesn't add any value to it. But overall, start simple. You will always find as your model expands and gets bigger, the complexity of the DAX is going to increase. But from an IT side, unless you're going to be that Power BI expert who's going to support the business in writing their DAX statements, you probably won't have to write much DAX. It's one of those, it's nice to learn in the same way that from a business analyst perspective, a data analyst perspective, SQL is nice to learn, but you can get away without ever using it. Yeah? So what do you think then? One of the things that I notice and I know goes on from my experience is there isn't much discussion about the real role of IT in a data platform. It's kind of either assumed IT are going to do it, or it's assumed IT are going to butt out and let the business get on with it. Whereas the reality is success comes from that marriage of actually getting the business and IT working together. And only through that can you have a successful deployment of Power BI. And to be honest as well, that goes beyond Power BI. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. You need to understand the mindset. And that's the problem, isn't it? Like for the alternatives, that what Power BI does really well is it allows that from Excel to enterprise grade data platform. And I don't see that. And that's been a big question mark as to where we're going to go and how the future is going to go for this industry and for this sector. Because really what the demand is for that enterprise grade, stable deployment and managed infrastructure that's going to serve up the same analytics week in, week out. Whereas we know the business is also going to change requirements and have new things. Oh, what about? Oh, how do we do? And the only way we can do that is with something more agile, like an Excel. So we need to have that capability of coping with it all. And Power BI and the whole Fabric suite just does it. And that's awkward for when you're saying, well, what's the competition going to be? So yeah, Power BI does it really well. And that's the idea of being able to bring together your IT side and your business side and actually align the two and build something that's really strong, really stable, has the agility you need when you need it, and has the stability and the rigidity that you need when you need it as well. Yeah? So I hope that's made sense. We'll do some more. We'll do a deeper dive into DAX and try and have a look at some of the DAX measures that we can do. And I'll probably have to switch to a different data set. I might go back and look at where we've gone before with it. We'll put some more measures in and we'll do a little bit more on DAX because I know we've kind of just touched on it a little bit. But a question you always have is, can we do more with DAX? Can we get more out of it? Let's have a look. For now though, stay safe, take care, ta-da.